The halls of the Air Force Command echoed with laughter the day Captain Emma Carter requested assignment to AB-2 bomber. She was considered too young, too green, too untested for the most advanced aircraft in the arsenal. Her request was brushed aside as wishful ambition. Yet 6 hours later, 12 enemy strongholds lay in smoldering ruin. And those same generals realized that stealth bombers had always been waiting for someone exactly like her. Captain Emma Carter was 29 years old. Auburn hair tied neatly back in regulation style, eyes the color of polished emerald scanning the skies with an instinct that defied instrument readings. She had spent 3 years piloting F-16 Fighting Falcons with unmatched precision, carving her name into the skies with maneuvers that left even seasoned pilots silent in awe. But among leadership, she was still seen as the female officer who needed more years in the cockpit before she could be trusted with billion-dollar machines. Her story did not begin with the academy. It began in the dusty outskirts of rural Nevada, where the sky stretched endless and open. Emma had grown up under the wing of her grandfather, Colonel Robert Carter, a decorated bomber pilot of the Cold War who believed flying was more than stick and throttle. He taught her that true mastery meant thinking in 3 dimensions, making decisions in fractions of a second, and understanding that every choice in the sky could decide the outcome of nations. Colonel Robert Carter had flown 127 missions in his long career, steering colossal B-52 Stratofortresses across hostile territories, threading their massive shadows through clouds thick with danger. He carried stories of Vietnam, the Persian Gulf, and operations so secret that even decades later the details remained cloaked. He spoke of storms that grounded entire squadrons while he pressed on, of nights when stars themselves were his only navigation, of missions that stretched across 20 hours without rest, yet demanded flawless precision at the final moment. These tales etched themselves into Emma's young imagination, shaping her belief that flying was not just skill, it was endurance, intellect, and courage fused together. On weekends when the sun lit Nevada's desert plains, he took her up in his Cessna 172. Though to call it a simple civilian craft was misleading, he had modified it with advanced navigation systems and flight computers that mimicked military complexity. In those flights, Emma was no passenger. She was a trainee, learning to master the mechanics of aviation while calculating constantly altitude, wind, distance, vectors. She grew into the skies as naturally as children grow into shoes. He often called her Little Aviator, reminding her that any pilot can fly level and straight, but only a true bomber pilot understands that one mission, one decision, can alter history. He warned her that controlling immense firepower was not a privilege. It was a burden of responsibility far heavier than the bombs themselves. She carried those words with her long after he passed, as if his voice still echoed across every runway she touched. By 22, Emma had earned a degree in aerospace engineering from the University of Nevada, a foundation that set her apart from most of her peers. She enlisted into the Air Force with fire in her chest and a vow to fly the most advanced aircraft her nation could produce. Her professors had admired her analytical mind, and her instructors noticed the way she treated flight not as memorized drills, but as living equations. She absorbed the science of lift, thrust, and stealth until it became intuition. During pilot training, Emma excelled in every area. She scored flawlessly in bombing simulations, demonstrated awareness sharp enough to command multi-aircraft formations, and solved tactical puzzles faster than instructors could present them. Her innovations in navigation and weapon systems delivery were not just effective, they were original. She did not simply follow established doctrine. She improved upon it. Her call sign Phantom came in her second deployment over Syria. She struck enemy positions with such precision and suddenness that foes never knew she was near until devastation surrounded them. Her jet vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving her comrades whispering that she flew like a ghost. In that deployment, she flew 89 sorties, each one returning intact. No damage, no failure. Her success rate was complete. She had already proven herself legendary. Yet in the ranks above, her name stirred doubt. For all her skill, she was still a woman in a world shaped by traditions of men. General Michael Harrison, commander of the 509th Bomb Wing, represented that tradition. He was 54, With 3 decades of bomber missions carved into his demeanor, his methods were tested and true, his worldview built upon an era where bombers were manned exclusively by men. His trust belonged to experience measured only in years, not innovation measured in results. When intelligence reported that 12 enemy bases had risen, each fortified into a network designed to resist conventional assault, the generals gathered in grave silence. These installations threatened shipping lanes, communication lines, and civilian populations. They were built with knowledge of American tactics, designed to resist everything the Air Force had previously attempted. Conventional attack would mean disaster. The only solution was precision, a single B-2 bomber weaving unseen through hostile skies, striking 12 targets in perfect sequence before defenses could react. It was a mission that demanded more than training. It demanded adaptability, courage, and an unshakable mind. General Harrison insisted the task go to Colonel John Mitchell, his most senior bomber pilot. Reliable, tested, and steady, to him Emma Carter was an eager yet unproven officer, too green for history's most complex strike. But Emma saw what others missed. She presented calculations, flight paths, and strategies that showed mastery of the B-2 far beyond her flight hours. She spoke not from ego, but from understanding. Her engineering mind unlocking solutions conventional training ignored. Time was slipping. Enemy defenses braced tighter with each passing hour. The window narrowed. Harrison faced the impossible. Trust the season past or risk the untested future. Emma looked at him across glowing screens. Her voice calm, yet firm. "Sir, I understand the stakes. I am ready to prove that innovation outweighs tradition when everything is on the line." And thus the making of a pilot became the opening chapter of a mission that would reshape history, not just for Emma Carter, but for every aviator who would follow. For hours after the decision was made, Captain Emma Carter stood before the dark triangular silhouette of the B-2 Spirit, the most elusive aircraft ever built by human hands. Its frame seemed less like a machine and more like a shadow, given form. Smooth angles designed to vanish against the sky. Radar-absorbing skin that swallowed the gaze of enemies. It was as if the night itself had been forged into a wing. This specific aircraft bore the name Spirit of Washington, tail number 88-0330, and tonight it would carry Emma on the most daring mission of her life, perhaps the most complex mission in the history of modern aviation. The air around the hangar buzzed with the energy of dozens of crew members moving with precise urgency. Fueling systems were checked, navigation computers calibrated. Every bolt examined and re-examined. This was not just preparation, it was ritual, a ceremony of steel and silence. Emma walked through the procedures with calm efficiency, her hands gliding across the panels of the cockpit, as if reacquainting herself with an old companion she had never actually flown before. Yet she absorbed the B-2 systems as though she had always known them. Her engineering background allowed her to see beyond switches and displays. She understood the logic within the circuitry, the conversation between hydraulics and software. She read the bomber's language fluently where others only memorized phrases. Her mission briefing played through her mind as she strapped in. 12 enemy bases arranged in a deadly lattice across hostile territory, each one armed with advanced air defenses, missile shields, and underground command structures. They were designed specifically to defeat American doctrine, designed by engineers who had studied American playbooks. They had prepared for every predictable move. But Emma had no intention of being predictable. Spirit 1, this is control. The voice crackled through her headset. Weather conditions are optimal. Defensive intelligence is current. You are cleared for departure. Execute Operation Phantom Strike. Emma's breath steadied. Her hand pressed the throttle. The Spirit of Washington rolled forward into the night. Engines whispering rather than roaring. A predator moving without sound. Soon she was airborne. Desert lights falling away beneath her. The horizon swallowing her into the infinite dark. Ahead lay hours of silence, danger, and decision. The first stage was penetration, slipping unseen through a shield of detection designed to catch even stealth aircraft. The enemy had woven radar arrays across valleys and mountains, overlapping like a spider's web. Most pilots would follow established corridors mapped from doctrine. But Emma veered differently. She merged her experience from F-16 combat runs with her deep grasp of stealth mechanics, creating a jagged flight path that bent logic, hugging terrain where none expected, adjusting altitude at unpredictable intervals. She was invisible not because of technology alone, but because of the mind guiding it. Her first target was the command and control hub, the brain that linked the 12 bases into one unified defense. If she severed that connection, the body would thrash blindly. She approached low and fast, sensors whispering in her ears. Radar beams swept the skies like unseen fingers searching for intruders. Emma's course threaded between them, her calculations precise down to fractions of seconds. Then, with a flicker of command, the spirit released its silent strike. The explosion erupted far. Below, a flower of fire blooming unseen by radar. The hub was gone before enemy operators even realized an attack had begun. One success fed into the next. The second and third targets fell quickly. Fuel depots and missile batteries incinerated with precision. Emma used delivery techniques adapted from her F-16 days, diving into angles the B-2 was not traditionally trained for. Her adaptability turned each strike into a ghost touch. But the enemy was not passive. By the fourth target, alarms screamed across their networks, missiles armed, defenses swiveled toward the sky. Search radars pulsed stronger. They knew something was out there, yet they could not see her. Emma's adaptive maneuvers kept her always just outside detection, like a shadow on the edge of vision. She struck again and again, each blast crippling coordination further. Her cockpit was a cocoon of tension, the hum of systems mixing with her steady breathing. Sweat traced across her temples, though the air was cool. She monitored dozens of instruments simultaneously, yet beyond numbers and lights, it was instinct guiding her. Instinct honed by years of training and sharpened by the lessons of her grandfather. Colonel Robert Carter had always told her that machines could be trusted only to a point. Beyond that, the pilot's judgment was the difference between victory and catastrophe. Targets 4 through 8 demanded invention in real time. She found herself rewriting tactics mid-flight, altering weapon delivery angles, exploiting blind zones in enemy radar arrays that revealed themselves only under pressure. Each decision had to be instantaneous. There was no luxury of extended planning. Every second she remained in hostile airspace increased the risk of detection and counterattack. Meanwhile, in the command center, General Michael Harrison stood before glowing screens, watching the impossible unfold. His most seasoned colonels stared in silence as reports confirmed one base after another erupting into ruin. Harrison had resisted her inclusion. Yet here, she was weaving history with every strike. The room was tense with the weight of realization. Tradition was being dismantled alongside enemy fortifications. Back in the cockpit, Emma felt the shift as she entered the final phase. Targets 9 through 12 remained, the most heavily defended. Enemy forces fully alert now. Missile sites bristling, interceptors scrambling from runways, search radars sweeping furiously. The entire network focused solely on hunting her down. This was the crucible, the trial that would decide not just the mission, but the proof of her belief that innovation mattered more than hierarchy. Target 9 erupted into fire under an attack vector that no manual had ever recommended. Target 10 followed when Emma exploited a software delay she had anticipated from studying engineering schematics. Her knowledge gave her an edge where others would have seen walls. Yet with each strike, the danger multiplied. Defensive systems learned quickly. Patterns tightened. The enemy no longer reacted blindly. They concentrated their fury on the final coordinates. The 11th base sat at the heart of their shield, a fortress wrapped in electronic armor. Emma breathed deeply, her hands tightening on the controls. She remembered her grandfather's words. One mission can change the course of history. Responsibility outweighs the skill itself. She dove into the maelstrom, twisting the spirit into maneuvers it had not been designed for. Stealth blended with aggression. Shadow fused with fire. As she emerged into the last stretch, only one target remained, the 12th installation, the culmination of 6 hours of unbroken tension. Her aircraft had become an extension of her body, her mind, her will. She lined up the strike, calculated the wind, The defenses, the trajectory, one more breath, one more release, and the base disappeared in an eruption that split the night wide open. Emma Carter had done it. All 12 targets eliminated. The network that threatened global stability dismantled by a single pilot who was once dismissed as too inexperienced. In her headset, silence stretched long, Command 2 stunned to reply. Then the voice of Harrison himself came. Heavy with awe, Spirit 1, what you accomplished tonight has redefined strategic bombing. You have proven that the future does not belong to tradition alone. Emma turned her course homeward, exhaustion settling across her like a heavy cloak, but inside her chest burned a quiet fire. She had carried her grandfather's legacy into the skies and forged her own. This was not the end. It was only the beginning. The journey back across hostile skies was long, the Spirit of Washington gliding silently through the dark. Captain Emma Carter kept her focus sharp until the very last mile. She knew that triumphs could turn to tragedies in an instant. Even as the mission was complete, she monitored every gauge and every sweep of radar until friendly ground was beneath her. When the bomber finally touched down on the runway, the silence inside the cockpit was almost deafening. She had been alone for 6 hours with nothing but the hum of systems and the steady rhythm of her own breath. Now the roar of ground crews rushing forward filled her ears, but she remained still for a moment, her hands resting on the controls, absorbing the reality of what she had just done. 12 targets destroyed, a network dismantled, a mission once thought impossible completed without a scratch. The command center was equally quiet when her report came through. All 12 targets eliminated, network neutralization complete. Returning to base, for nearly a full minute no one spoke. Screens glowed with confirmation. Data poured in from satellites, sensors, and allied observers. The truth was undeniable. One bomber, one pilot, had succeeded where conventional strategy would have cost thousands of lives. General Michael Harrison was the first to break the silence. His voice carried not just authority, but humility. Spirit 1, what you accomplished exceeds anything we believed possible. You have redefined strategic bombing operations. His words echoed across the operations floor. The very same man who had dismissed her hours earlier now spoke with reverence. Emma climbed down from the cockpit, the desert air cool against her sweat-soaked skin. Technicians and crew members gathered around her, their expressions a mix of disbelief and pride. Though no cheers erupted, the respect was deeper than celebration. It was the kind of silence soldiers give to someone who has stepped into the fire and returned unburned. Inside, the debriefing room maps of the enemy network flickered on screens, each installation marked with a red cross. Intelligence officers explained how the strikes had dismantled command links, crippled defenses, and prevented counteroffensives. Analysts marveled at her flight path, her timing, her choice of angles. Every decision that had seemed unconventional now appeared as brilliance. Emma explained her thought process calmly. She described how her engineering knowledge revealed vulnerabilities in systems others assumed impenetrable, how her experience with fast, agile F-16 combat allowed her to maneuver a heavy stealth bomber like a predator rather than a lumbering machine. She detailed the calculations she made mid-flight, adjusting to changes the moment they appeared. General Harrison listened intently, each word dismantling the doubts he had carried. He realized that his definition of experience had been too narrow. Years logged in a bomber's seat mattered, but so did adaptability, intelligence, and innovation. Emma Carter had combined them all and achieved what tradition alone never could. The analysis of the mission soon spread through the Air Force. Instructors pored over the recordings. Pilots studied her maneuvers. Tacticians rewrote manuals to include strategies that only hours before had been considered impossible. Emma's approach became the subject of heated discussions in briefing halls. Her fusion of engineering insight and combat instinct was a new doctrine in the making. But alongside admiration came resistance. There were still voices who whispered that her success was luck, that she had gambled and fortune had favored her. Others feared that embracing her methods would mean discarding decades of proven procedure. The military had always been built on tradition, and tradition does not surrender easily. Emma did not argue. She simply continued to demonstrate. She joined training exercises and showed younger pilots how to think beyond the checklist, how to see the aircraft not as a machine to be controlled, but as a system to be understood. She urged them to ask why rather than simply how. She taught that memorized procedures were starting points, not limits. Her students quickly realized they were learning not just to fly, but to innovate. 6 months later, recognition came formally. Captain Emma Carter was promoted to Major, her name etched into official commendations for executing the most complex single-pilot mission in Air Force history. She was offered command of an advanced unit dedicated to precision bombing operations. Her methods now the framework for a program that would transform the way the Air Force trained its aviators. General Harrison himself became her strongest advocate. He addressed fellow commanders with a new conviction. The most dangerous mistake we can make is dismissing innovation because it comes from someone outside convention. Capability must be measured by results, not by years alone. His words carried weight, for they were spoken by a man who had once resisted her most fiercely. His transformation lent credibility to hers. For Emma, the promotion was not a crown, but a responsibility. She knew that younger pilots now looked to her as proof that unconventional minds could rise. She felt the weight of expectation, not just to succeed personally, but to change an institution. She carried it with the same steady resolve she had carried the bomber through enemy skies. The public, too, caught glimpses of her story. Though much remained classified, headlines hinted at the young pilot who had redefined the future of aerial warfare. Whispers spread of the phantom who struck unseen and left no trace. In communities across the nation, young women and men looked at her story and saw possibility. She had become more than a pilot. She was a symbol of what determination, knowledge, and courage could achieve when doubt surrounded them. Yet Emma herself remained grounded. She returned often to Nevada, walking the quiet fields where her grandfather had once taken her up in a little Cessna. She stood beneath the same vast sky that had nurtured her dreams. She remembered his words, "Little aviator, one mission can change history." She smiled, knowing that his legacy had not only guided her, but now stretched far beyond, shaping the next generation of warriors who would carry their own impossible missions into the air. The weight of victory was not only in the lives saved or the bases destroyed, it was in a shifting of belief, the proof that innovation had a rightful place beside tradition. That courage could be measured not only in years served, but in the willingness to face what others said could not be done. Emma Carter had carried that weight and turned it into strength. Her journey was far from over, for the battles ahead would not only be fought in the skies, but in the minds of those who still clung to old ways. She was prepared, as always, to fly into the storm. Major Emma Carter stepped into her new role with the same quiet determination she had carried through every mission. Her unit was small at first, a handful of carefully chosen aviators, some fresh from training, others with combat experience, all of them curious, cautious, and eager. They had heard the whispers about her mission, the phantom strike that destroyed 12 enemy strongholds in a single night. They knew they were about to learn from someone who had already redefined what flying meant. Emma did not begin with bravado. She began with questions. She asked her pilots why they trusted certain procedures, why they believed some maneuvers were impossible, why they thought checklists were the final word instead of the first step. At first, her students struggled. They were used to memorizing commands, repeating doctrine, and doing exactly as instructed, but slowly Emma's methods cracked open their thinking. She was not teaching them to break rules. She was teaching them to understand the reasons behind the rules. She gathered them around simulators and asked them to fly missions designed to overwhelm, missions where traditional procedures guaranteed failure. In those moments, she showed them how to bend the aircraft to their will by understanding it deeply. She revealed that every system had strengths, weaknesses, and hidden opportunities. She urged them to think like engineers as much as pilots, to see airflow, pressure, and electronics as allies rather than mysteries. Her lessons drew heavily from her own path. She reminded them of her grandfather, Colonel Robert Carter, who once told her that controlling immense firepower was not a privilege but a burden. She passed that wisdom down, teaching that bombing was not about destruction alone, but about responsibility. One mission could change the course of history, and the weight of that responsibility demanded not only skill but character. Resistance came from outside her unit. Senior officers who believed her success was a fluke argued that she encouraged recklessness. They feared her methods would produce undisciplined flyers. Emma responded not with confrontation, but with results. Her unit began running exercises against veteran squadrons and consistently outperforming them. In war games, her students anticipated threats, adapted under pressure, and struck targets with precision that astonished observers. Their victories spoke louder than any argument could. General Michael Harrison, once her greatest skeptic, became her strongest shield. He defended her program before the highest levels of command. Pointing to undeniable results, he reminded them that Emma had accomplished what experience alone had failed to provide. He warned them that ignoring innovation was a greater risk than embracing it. His advocacy gave Emma space to continue shaping her pilots without constant interference. Her unit earned a reputation quickly. They were called the Shadow Wing, a name given by peers who noticed how their tactics mirrored Emma's own phantom-like style, striking from angles others dismissed, disappearing before defenses could react. Emma never encouraged the nickname, but she understood its meaning. Her influence had created a new way of flying. The transformation was not only technical, but personal. Her pilots began to believe in themselves differently. Emma told them that rank and tradition were not the only measures of worth. Capability came from preparation, creativity, and courage. She pushed them to trust their instincts when logic demanded hesitation. She reminded them that war was dynamic, that enemies learned and adapted, and that only flexible minds could stay ahead. Outside of training, she built bonds with her team, sharing meals, listening to their fears, reminding them that even legends feel doubt. She spoke openly of her own struggles, the laughter of generals when she requested her bomber assignment, the whispers behind closed doors that said she would fail. She taught them that resilience was forged in rejection, that disbelief from others was often the surest sign that you stood on the edge of something revolutionary. Her program soon expanded. More pilots were assigned, more aircraft made available, and Emma was tasked with formalizing her methods into a doctrine. She resisted writing rigid manuals. Instead, she built scenarios that required pilots to think, to adapt, to solve. She created simulations where every mission unfolded differently, ensuring no one could rely on rote memory. She wanted to train thinkers, not just operators. "You are not here to fly like me," she told them during one gathering. "You are here to fly like yourselves, to discover abilities no one has ever seen before. My path was mine. Yours will be different, but the principle remains. Innovation and courage are the wings that carry us farther than tradition alone." The culture of the Air Force began to shift slowly. Younger officers looked to Emma as proof that talent could overcome barriers. Women in particular saw her story as a door kicked open. They entered flight schools with renewed confidence. Knowing the ceiling had already been shattered, veterans too began reconsidering their own habits, asking themselves if they had grown too reliant on old patterns. Emma was invited to speak at academies. Her presence electrified cadets who hung on every word. She described her mission in broad strokes, but focused more on the mindset that made it possible. She told them that the sky belonged not to those who repeated the past, but to those who dared to reimagine it. Through all this, Emma remained deeply aware of the risks. She knew that innovation carried danger, that encouraging creativity could also mean encouraging mistakes. But she trusted that the greater danger was stagnation. She drilled into her pilots the discipline to balance risk with calculation, courage with caution, freedom with responsibility. In quiet moments, she thought often of her grandfather. She imagined him sitting in the corner of a hangar watching her unit prepare, nodding in approval. She carried his legacy with her, but had expanded it. Where he taught her that one mission could change history, she now taught others that one pilot could reshape an entire institution. The Shadow Wing became a symbol, not just within the Air Force, but across allied nations. Military observers from abroad studied Emma's methods, eager to adapt similar programs. Her influence extended beyond borders, sparking conversations about the future of warfare, about the balance between technology and human ingenuity. Emma Carter was no longer simply a pilot who had succeeded against impossible odds. She was a leader shaping the next generation. forging minds as much as wings, preparing them for challenges even she could not foresee. And though some continued to resist her vision, the tide was turning. The future was being written in her image. Her journey was still unfolding. The world was changing, enemies adapting, allies watching, but Emma knew one truth above all. The skies would always belong to those willing to think differently, to carry the burden of responsibility with courage, and to step into the storm when others stepped back. She had done it once, and now she was teaching many to do it again. Years passed, and Major Emma Carter rose further through the ranks. Her reputation spread beyond the walls of the Air Force. She became known across military circles not only as the Phantom, who had once dismantled 12 enemy bases in a single night, but as the architect of a new era of aerial warfare. Her leadership transformed the way pilots were trained. Her philosophy echoed across academies and into the minds of countless young aviators. By now, she held the title of colonel, commanding the most advanced strategic operations program in the service. She oversaw pilots who flew not only bombers but fighters, reconnaissance craft, and next-generation drones, each of them trained under principles she had forged, principles rooted not in rote memorization, but in understanding, adaptability, and courage. Her students entered the skies with eyes sharper and minds freer than those who came before them. They were taught to look beyond the cockpit instruments, to think about airflow and design, to anticipate how enemies might react rather than just respond. Emma encouraged them to imagine scenarios no manual had described, to practice improvisation until creativity became instinct. They learned that true mastery came not from perfect drills, but from the ability to handle the imperfect, the unexpected, the storm no one had predicted. Colonel Robert Carter's voice remained with her, the voice of her grandfather who had first taken her up in that old Cessna. She still heard his steady tone reminding her that firepower was a burden as much as a gift. She repeated his lessons to her students, telling them that one mission could alter the path of nations, and that the responsibility of wielding such power demanded integrity as much as skill. General Michael Harrison, too, had changed. The man who once doubted her became one of her fiercest allies. He often told others that the most dangerous mistake any leader could make was assuming innovation could be dismissed. At conferences and gatherings, he recounted her story, how his skepticism had nearly cost them victory, how Emma Carter's mission had proven that adaptability was as vital as experience. Her influence extended far beyond her own command. Allied nations requested cooperation. Eager to learn the methods she pioneered, military academies around the world studied her doctrines. Entire textbooks were rewritten to include her techniques. She had become not just a commander, but a thinker, shaping the very philosophy of modern air combat. For Emma, however, the greatest pride was not in medals or recognition. It was in watching her students succeed. She stood on runways as younger pilots returned from their own complex missions, seeing in their eyes the same fire that once burned in hers. She heard them speak with confidence about choices they made mid-flight, choices born from innovation rather than fear. In those moments, she knew her work was not just about her own victories, but about preparing the next generation to carry the torch forward. Civilian life also began to feel her impact. Though much of her mission remained classified, enough of the story reached the public to inspire. In classrooms, young girls who once doubted their place in aviation now wrote essays about becoming pilots. In engineering labs, students studied her career as proof that technical knowledge and courage could merge to create breakthroughs. She became a symbol not only of military achievement, but of human potential. Emma herself remained humble. She still returned often to Nevada, walking across the wide, open fields where her dreams first took root. The desert winds whispered like old friends. She looked up at the endless sky, remembering how it once felt impossibly large and now felt like home. She sometimes imagined her grandfather walking beside her, nodding in silent approval. She often asked herself what her greatest legacy would be. Was it the night she destroyed 12 enemy bases? Was it the doctrine she had written? Or was it the confidence she had instilled in countless young aviators? She decided it was not any single mission or medal. Her legacy was the mindset she had spread, the belief that adaptability and courage mattered more than blind adherence to tradition, that thinking differently was not weakness but strength. She reminded her students that the world would always produce skeptics, people who insisted that experience measured in years outweighed fresh ideas. She told them that she herself had been underestimated and dismissed until the moment came when she proved that the impossible could be done. She urged them to be ready for their own moment, because history does not ask politely, it demands. And only those who are willing to step forward when others hesitate will shape the outcome. Emma Carter became more than a name in reports. She became a story passed from pilot to pilot, from teacher to student, a story told to remind every generation that courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act with vision when fear surrounds you. She was living proof that the most dangerous limitations are not the ones built by enemies, but the ones built inside institutions and inside our own minds. And so the Phantom's legacy grew, not as a ghost that haunted the skies, but as a beacon for those who would fly into storms yet to come. Her story whispered across flight lines and briefing rooms, across desert runways and carrier decks, across classrooms where dreams took shape. For somewhere right now, another young pilot is being told they are too inexperienced, too untested, too different. Somewhere another leader is laughing at ambition, dismissing innovation, and somewhere that pilot will rise. They will step into their aircraft, into the storm, and prove, as Emma Carter once did, that the sky does not belong to tradition alone. It belongs to those who dare to think differently, to those who carry responsibility with courage, to those who believe that when everything is on the line, innovation can matter more than experience. Emma Carter's journey was proof of that truth. Her name written not only in reports and manuals, but in the very sky itself. Her wings carving the reminder that the future is always shaped by those who dare to fly beyond the limits others impose. And as long as there are storms above and challenges ahead, her story will continue to inspire.